Define what y-intercept is. Okay, there's no sense in finding y-intercept of a line if you don't know what it means. And there's other ways to, I think there's actually probably other words we could use that are maybe simpler. But basically it's where it crosses the y-axis.
When it's going down up, right?
No, the y-intercept actually has nothing to do with the slope. Okay, it just means where it crosses the y-axis. Okay, at what y value does the line cross the y-axis? Now, you might already be thinking, does every line cross the y-axis? What do you guys think?
Yes. If it's a line,
It has to.
If it's a line.
What if it's a vertical line?
Well, unless it's like zero undefined, like if it's positive, negative, it has to cross the line.
Okay, if it has a positive or negative slope, yeah, if it has a positive or negative slope, it will cross. And then he's saying, he's making a point, well, what if it's right on the y-axis? We'll talk about that as well. That's actually a good point.
But that would make it undefined.
It would be an undefined slope, but it would still cross the y-axis. So don't confuse slope and y-intercept. They're not the same thing. Slope refers to how much the graph changes as, you know, x increases, whereas slope, y-intercept is just where it touches the y-axis.
It says crosses the y-axis. If it was on the y-axis, that's not crossing it, it's just on it.
True.
It's confusion.
Yep, we'll talk about it. It's just an exception. It's not the main gist of the lesson. Okay, again, this is something you should already have written down. Let's talk about why the y-intercept is this number over here. Okay, so what I mean by number is not the number in front of the x, it's slope, not the x, not the y, the number by itself, which is called a constant number. Why is that the y-intercept? Okay, so I want you to write this down. So let's say we have an equation y equals 2x plus 3. Now, before we go ahead and find the y-intercept, I want us to take a look at the graph. So we said the y-intercept is wherever it crosses the y-axis. Can everybody see that it's going to be somewhere on this line?
Yep.
Let me ask you something. What does x equal on this line?
0.
0. Okay, it's not 1. It's not -1. It's 0. So anytime a line crosses the y-axis, let's just assume, you know, it's like this, right? Okay, so wherever it crosses right here, x is 0, no matter what. Okay, even if the graph crosses down here, okay, it's going to have a different y value, but still the x value is going to be 0. With that being said, we can use that concept to figure out the y-intercept for this equation. What do you think is going to go in place of the x? 0. If you're trying to find the y-intercept, just plug in 0 for x. 2 times 0 equals? Now notice what happened. That's okay. What we got was this number at the end. Okay? Why? Because this whole term became 0. Became 0 because it was a y-intercept. Let's try another one. Let's say you had y equals 4/3 x minus 7. So he knows it's y equals -7 because when we plug in 0 for x again, that 4/3 won't make a difference. Okay, remember I was telling you slope and y-intercept are not the same thing? They're really not the same thing. They do form a line, but they're separate concepts. Exactly. All you have to do because of this is just look at that number dangling on the end, or it doesn't have to be on the end. It can just be the number by itself, not the number next to the x. That's going to give you where it crosses the y-axis because when you plug in 0 for x, that other term will go away. The point I want to make for this one too is the negative does stay. Okay, it's not +7. It's whatever the sign in front is included. So the y-intercept would be -7. Let's do some more examples. Let's say we have 5 minus 2/3 x equals y.
Five.
What is the y-intercept of this line?
5.
It's
Negative 5.
No,
No, it's 5. It's just
positive.
5. It's just 5. It's just 5.
okay.
Germany.
Good, guys. Good, good.
Germany.
Shh. What's the sign here in front of the 5? Positive, okay? It's a number by itself. It's not the slope. It's not next to x. It's not the y. It's 5. So therefore, the y-intercept is 5. Now, again, I want to show you what this would look like. And on another lesson, I'll teach you how to graph these. But it's going to cross the y-axis at 5. And it's going to go down 2 and over 3. So it's going to go down 2 over 3. It's going to look like this. Not a perfect line, but you get the point. Okay, so it crosses the y-axis at 5. That's not a good arrow. Crosses the y-axis at 5, and it has a slope of negative 2/3. All right, guys, a few more examples. Let's go to example 2. Y equals 3. What's the y-intercept of this line?
3.
How do you know it's 3?
Because it's the only number on there.
Okay, it's a number by itself. It's not next to an x. Well, the slope would be 0. Okay, if you wanted to fill in the equation, it would be y equals 0x plus 3. And now you can definitely see the y-intercept is 3. If we were to graph this line, look where it crosses the y-axis. Crosses at 3, intercepts at 3, right? That's why they call it y-intercept. Intercept means cross. Okay, one more example. What's the y-intercept? No, we might do 2 more. What's the y-intercept of this line?
0. Undefined.
Undefined?
Actually, it would be 0. The 1 is 0. It wouldn't be plus minus anything. It should just be 0.
Nope.
It's 5.
It won't cross, okay? If we graph this, x equals negative 5, we know it's a vertical line. That line will never cross the y-axis.
So will it be 0 or
It won't be 0. In order for it to be 0, it would have to cross right there. It doesn't cross there.
it'd be blank or it'd be undefined?
There is none. None, guys.
You two seriously yell like.
If it's x equals something, it's not going to cross the y-axis. It's none. It's not 0. Okay? Yes?
The backside, where are you supposed to put the what?
I do want to bring up that example that he brought up. It's a weird one. Okay, I'm about to explain.
Let me explain.
A few of you brought up was, what if the equation was x equals 0? What would the y-intercept be? And this kind of reminds me of dividing by 0 or 0 to the 0, or sometimes 0 just introduces some weird things. So if we were to ask, what is the y-intercept of this line? So normally, like in the last example, we said that there is none because x equals a number. In the case of x equals 0, we talked about the fact x is always going to be 0. Let me pull up. Okay, if we graph this, it's going to go right over top onto the y-axis. So this is the equation x equals 0 because x is always 0. See, here's x equals 0. It's a vertical line. You can kind of intuitively answer this one. Good. Okay, infinite. Any other answers?
Undefined, because it's any one of those numbers or what? But if it's a.
What would you say? Yeah, it crosses everywhere. In fact, my answer would be everywhere. That's okay if you put that, okay? Because that's the answer. And that's the exception. Like I said, normally it's pretty straightforward, but it's on top of the y-axis, so it would be everywhere. So on the worksheet, for those questions, go ahead and fill that out, and for every equation, put the y-intercept as well, and then we'll go over the answers.